Look, when you make motorcycle content for a living, it's easy to fall back on old tropes. Best beginner bike? Turbo Hayabusa. Best value motorcycle? SV650. Best starter track bike? Ninja 400. These are all motorcycles that just perfectly hit the mark, and I can't help but recommend them. But then there's a whole other category of motorcycles, because I get lots of comments saying, why don't you talk about this bike or the CB500F or my Suzuki Boulevard? They are unfortunately a bit forgettable. So in my humble opinion, they might be a little boring or milquetoast, lame, or any number of adjectives you could conjure up if you also had access to a thesaurus like I do underneath the table here. But why not in today's video, let's stroll through 10 different motorcycles that have been perhaps forgotten in the old Yammy Noob lore and the canonical fiction that is this YouTube channel. Perhaps there's some motorcycles that deserve their 10 minutes of fame. Can't give them 15 minutes. That'd be way too long. I think one motorcycle that I don't talk about, perhaps to a criminal degree, is the Kawasaki W800. Now, this is a motorcycle I've been familiar with for a long, long time. An ex-girlfriend of mine actually had one of these bikes, and that's how I found out about them. And that's not the reason I don't talk about it, although I just thought about that, and that is kind of funny. But if you don't know what the W800 is, let me talk a little bit about it. You can kind of think of this as Kawasaki's genuine, honest-to-God retro bike, because it is not only retro in appearance, it is very much retro in the specs department too. It uses a 773cc air-cooled parallel twin, making less than 50 horsepower and less than 50 foot-pounds of torque. This bike is kind of like if Kawasaki made a Royal Enfield but charged Honda prices. It weighs 500 pounds, it has really rickety suspension, 5-speed gears, and just basically nothing that interesting about it. And the MSRP is, get ready, $10,400 US. So if you go and buy one brand new, this is like more than $12,000 for this machine. And that is patently absurd. You could buy a Royal Enfield that is functionally the same thing for basically half the price. A Bonneville T100 costs merely $500 more, and if you know about the Bonneville, it's liquid cooled, makes more power, it has arguably better fit and finish than the W800. The W800 is certainly an old school heritage model, and that's why Kawasaki still makes it in their lineup, but truthfully, there's like 5 or 6 other bikes you should get instead of this one, which renders it a bit forgettable in my opinion. All right, so this is another bike that I've talked about a little bit. I've alluded to it being a little bit boring, and I've kind of stopped including it in a lot of my middleweight comparison videos and even talking about it as competition. It's the BMW F800 and 900R. The F800R was BMW's sort of like Me Too parallel twin middle displacement naked bike that they made from 2008 to 2019. And then it got replaced by the F900R, but it really is just very unexciting, and I don't really see what it adds to the marketplace other than being another parallel twin that you could buy. The F800R specifically is pretty lackluster. It's basically just like a German Z650. Basically, BMW tried to make a premium middleweight motorcycle, but left out all the fun factor and all the cool stuff that we like on middleweight naked motorcycles, and you're left with a rather soulless, rather boring option. And people on Reddit love this motorcycle, so that must mean it certainly sucks. Seriously, I wouldn't trust anything anyone says on our motorcycles for any reason. The new F900R's styling is a little bit updated, but again, facing very stiff competition from the Street Triple, Duke 990, and the almighty MT09 SP, I just certainly don't see why you would end up with this bike in your garage. The Honda CB500F is also a bike that I try to forget, but Honda people love to remind me about it. The CBR 500R for me is more of a crime against humanity than the 500F, but the 500F is still out there, still trying to be a beginner naked sport bike thing, and it's not really succeeding for basically all the same reasons that the CBR 500R doesn't. It weighs 50 pounds more than a Z500 and makes the same amount of power. It costs $1,000 less than an MT07 and is about half as fun. It's heavy, boring, overpriced, and pretty uninspired. It's a bit too expensive to be a beginner bike and yet too underpowered to be a middleweight bike, kind of not really serving the purpose for any rider, in my opinion. The CB500F is certainly a motorcycle you should only buy if you get a really good deal on a used one, or you see one floating around on Marketplace and you think, yeah, okay, I'll get a little 450cc entry-level naked sport bike thing, that's fine for me, but brand new, that's a really tough sell. And again, we're listing off bikes that are pretty forgettable in today's video. Not necessarily bad or poor quality or anything like that. They just don't do anything that particularly inspiring in the category, and it makes it so that whenever you see a big comparison video, they typically don't even show up. All right, the Harley-Davidson street models have to be talked about because they're certainly forgettable. I literally forget and forgot that Harley made this motorcycle for so many different videos. When it comes up, I go, oh yeah, that's right. Harley actually tried to make entry-level approachable machines and just failed so hard. Maybe we should count ourselves lucky that Harley doesn't try to make entry-level bikes anymore, because when they do, it either ends up like the Buell Blast or like these things. And they're both atrocious in their own right. Although I do love the Buell Blast for how ridiculously silly and bad it is, being half of a Sportster engine. That's certainly less forgettable than the Harley street models. The 750 and Street Rod 750 both make decent enough power, but they weigh well over 500 pounds, which is just not acceptable for this category and this relative comparison. They're pretty questionably built, and they have very limited aftermarket support. And that's for a Harley-Davidson, the kings of aftermarket support. And the Street 500 is basically just a really bad Rebel 500. It has worse ergonomics, a less willing engine, and just kind of poor overall. I don't know what a used one trades for, but it can't be any more than a couple bucks and maybe a ride on a donkey, because you certainly wouldn't want to trade an actual donkey for this motorcycle. That has to be more valuable. I think I'd rather have a pet donkey than a Street 750. Let me know in the comments if you'd prefer a donkey over that bike. I don't know. Disliking the Harley street models is something that Harley riders and all other motorcyclists can actually agree on, which is pretty rare. The only people who bought these bikes are people who couldn't get approved for financing anywhere else. Because let me tell you, Harley financing can get you approved no matter what your situation is. 430 credit score, $12,000 a year income, congratulations, you just got yourself a brand new Sportster. Yes, it'll be at 28% APY, but you know what? It's worth it, brother. Worth it. All right, Metro Cruisers in general are very forgettable. They're kind of all interchangeable in my opinion. They're all a dime a dozen, but their riders are certainly devout, aren't they? I've never felt compelled to talk about a Suzuki Boulevard, a Yamaha Roadstar, or even a Kawasaki Vulcan model, the larger displacement ones, certainly not the smaller ones, y'all know that. These bikes were literally built to appeal to the American cruiser demographic, and as such, it really feels like they were created out of some fever dream of a bean counter spreadsheet. They weren't built with actual passion or panache or anything like that. They basically follow the exact same formula as Harley-Davidson, albeit with slightly better reliability. It has a giant air-cooled, low-revving V-twin engine and gargantuan chromed-out looks. Again, they're all pretty interchangeable. And weirdly enough, I do feel like they're kind of pandering to Americans. It's like they think that Americans just want big black chrome B-twin motorcycle. Again, at 23% APY at your local Harley-Davidson dealership. Metro Cruisers basically offer the same underwhelming kind of pedestrian riding experience that Harley-Davidsons offer, but they have no clout or heritage, so to speak of. Again, every Metro Cruiser is so vague and nondescript, I cannot hold in my memory any of the different ones that I've seen or point out specific differences. For example, if you see a Street Triple or an MT-09 or a Duke 990, those all look pretty different. If you see a Panigale or an R1 or an S1000, they're all pretty different. You will hold them in your memory. Are you really going to be able to tell the difference between a Suzuki Boulevard and a Kawasaki Vulcan? No. And on top of that, a majority of our audience is certainly under the age of 40, and talking about Metro Cruisers, which is certainly a 55-plus thing, is probably just bad business for the channel. Triumph calls this color Cosmic Yellow on the Street Triple 765 RS, and I'd like to think it's cosmic because when you find out that you've won this motorcycle on yamanoob.co, you're going to ascend to the heavens and be in a heaven-like cosmic state of existence as this thing wheels itself into your driveway because you won it on yamanoob.co. Become a member on the website. Get your chances locked and loaded. You'll join our Discord, get access to the newsletter. But if that doesn't sound appealing, pick up a hat, a t-shirt, a hoodie. We sell all kinds of great stuff on the website. Every dollar you spend will not only support the show, but will also get you entered to win, subject to an amazing multiplier. Get entered to win this bike. Don't sleep on it. Okay, the new Suzuki Katana is also very forgettable. Do you guys remember when this motorcycle launched? Yeah, I don't either, but it was literally just a Suzuki GSX 1000 that they kind of reskinned. It wasn't anything different, wasn't anything unique. And if you know anything about the Katana, it was certainly a unique motorcycle. It was one of the few bikes to feature a pop-up headlight from the factory back in the 80s. Very cool. Since the new Katana was just a styling exercise, I kind of feel like everyone looked at it, looked at the price, and then went, yeesh, I'm not buying that, and then moved on to something else. Let me know in the comments if you actually own a new Suzuki Katana, because I would love to hear your opinion as to why you got it. And again, when your motorcycle is essentially the same as a GSX S1000, which is already a very long-in-the-tooth motorcycle with different styling, I think we can all agree it's not necessarily better, it's just different. That's not a very good value prop. You get way more bang for buck for that kind of money in basically the rest of the hyper naked category, particularly the MT10. So it's really hard to make the case for a Katana. And I just have not really heard anybody making a lot of videos or being excited about the Katana in general. All right, the Honda CB1100, the newer one, is one that kind of forgot about too, but it's actually kind of a sweet bike, but not enough people own them in my opinion. The CB1100 is Honda's actual UJM heritage model, and it's pretty sweet. It's got an enormous air-cooled 1140cc 4-cylinder motor, which is pretty rare in today's world. It's got a cradle frame, a 5-speed transmission, and it weighs 540 pounds. So yeah, it's literally just an old school UJM that they're building new. Unfortunately, in modern times, many riders don't want to pay new Honda prices for old-fashioned tech. They're very different riders and buyers than Harley, for example. When it launched in 2010, it cost over $10,000 brand new, which adjusted for 2024 dollars must be like $56,000 or something like that with the way inflation's going. At least that's what the internet would lead me to believe. Eggs used to be 5 cents. Now they're $50 for 30 of them. I don't know. The economy. I think the CB1100 actually is super sweet and more people should remember it, but it's one of those bikes that I never remember about whenever I'm thinking about making new videos or anything like that. But when they come across my desk, I do get very excited about them. They're pretty cool. Another bike I get excited about when I see, especially when I see a newer one that someone's bought and is actually still championing a little bit, is the DR650. But basically any of these giant large displacement air-cooled single-cylinder thumpers that are just pretty awesome, do everything Swiss Army knives that you could probably replace parts with from a hardware store. Seriously, I bet someone could rebuild a DR650 by just going to Ace Hardware and just picking up a bunch of bolts and probably putting it back together. The XR650L is, I think, the longest running production motorcycle unchanged at this point. I think they launched it in 1993, so that is 31 years unchanged. Pretty crazy. Hell, even the DRZ400 got an update, and you know the DR650 is not going to receive an update. Neither is the XR650L. There's no chance. But hey, with engine sizes increasing year over year, maybe these bikes will fail upwards at some point. Maybe a large displacement single cylinder is the next generation of parallel twin 270-degree crank, blah, blah, blah. Maybe these bikes are apex predators. We just couldn't see it at the time. Now, I can't fault you if you've forgotten that these motorcycles exist, but they are still out there and very much still churning, because the guy down the street had one in 2005, and he is still riding it. DR650 people are like their own breed of riders. Don't try to talk to them, don't engage with them, and let's not for a moment remind them that their bike is unfortunately a little forgettable, especially with all the hot new baby adventure and updated dual sport models out there that are objectively a little bit better. All right, another pretty forgettable motorcycle is the Bonneville Speedmaster. The Bonneville Speedmaster, and to an extent the Bobber as well, in my opinion, are kind of forgettable because they deviate so far from the traditional Bonneville kind of stature, that old school standard cafe racer thing, into this bizarre cruiser and bobber thing that it renders them kind of like, oh yeah, Triumph makes that bike? The Bonneville Bobber kind of looks like a Harley-Davidson that a 5-year-old tried to draw from memory. It's like you look at the seat and you're like, what is it attached to? The Bobber and the Speedmaster both have those silly chunky tires, and really the Bobber kind of looks like Deb fell off the back and took half of the motorcycle with her. And the Speedmaster looks like it was the Bonneville designed by Dr. Scholl's for optimal ergonomic comfort. It kind of looks like one of those super ergonomic keyboards turned into a motorcycle, basically, and with like old school retro flavor. Both bikes are great, they're fine, but a little forgettable. All right, our last forgettable motorcycle is the Honda NC750X, which we can all agree is basically a scooter that was given unregulated growth hormones. You know that when a motorcycle's most memorable feature is a frunk, you kind of got a bit of a problem. It's got a pretty lame parallel twin that doesn't really rev very hard. I think it revs out to like 6,000 RPM, which is truly some Harley-Davidson numbers. But because it was built by Honda, it will probably survive the heat death of the universe because that's a crazy under stress engine from Honda. I bet you could fuel up the gas tank with chocolate milk and the Honda will somehow get you to where you're trying to go. It also features a DCT transmission, which is kind of lame if we're being totally honest. Also, the engineers apparently got so bored while building this bike, they forgot to put a dash on it. They just put the dash from a graphing calculator and just called it a day. Considering this motorcycle costs just less than $500 than a Transalp, Honda also must have forgotten it exists, and now they're scrambling to try to figure out where to put it in their lineup or how to axe it. Maybe it's a bestseller. I have no idea, but I genuinely forget that the NC750 exists. All right, boys, those are 10 pretty forgettable motorcycles. Let me know in the comments if you own any of these bikes or what you think about them. I had a lot of fun making this video, going down memory lane a little bit, and generally not remembering some of these bikes. I've actually ridden and reviewed several of these bikes, and I cannot really tell you what I thought about them. So maybe you can go and find some videos on what I actually thought about them. But thank you so much for checking out today's video. I truly do appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later. Well, boys, that's the end of the show for today, but there's always a new video tomorrow. Every single day, there's a Yami Noob video. While you wait for the next one to queue up, become a member on YamiNoob.co and join to win this amazing Triumph Street Triple 765 RS that's right next to me. Cosmic yellow, street performance, track performance, a sonorous 3-cylinder. It has it all. Make sure you join on YamiNoob.co and don't delay.